Hi, welcome to YALSA Snack Break. I'm Maureen Hartman. I'm the Strategic Services Division Manager at Hennepin County Library, and I'm a former YALSA board member. I'm a former teen librarian and a former youth services coordinator. I love all those jobs equally, including the one I have now. Welcome to one of YALSA's Snack Break, our first one, a short, bite-sized opportunity to learn some new things. Recently, I hosted a YALSA webinar called What I Stopped Doing, Improving Services to Youth by Taking on Less. And as I thought about the questions and feedback I've received related to that topic, I decided to focus today's snack break on some planning tools. Some ways, some tools that you can use when you start a new service, a new opportunity, a new program, a new partnership, so you can be clear in your own head why you're doing it, the impact it will have on you, your coworkers, and of course, on teens themselves. A goal without a plan is just a wish. So if we want to see different results in our library and in our work, we need to make a plan. And the first thing I want to say about planning tools is they are not your enemy. As I've worked with staff, and I've experienced this in my own work, taking the discipline to sit down and planfully consider your options, your strategies, your actions does not and doesn't have to take away from the creativity of your work. Even for staff that get the majority of their energy from spending time in direct service with teens, planning will help you maximize that time you have, help you make a case for why you need to spend that time, and help you prioritize that time over all the other clutter that's in your head. If you haven't done much formal planning work and you start to Google planning tools, you might get a bit overwhelmed, but it can also really be a good place to start. Resources in this area are everywhere online, especially related to project management and to strategic planning. But even if you're not officially a project manager or not working on your library strategic plan, you can learn so much from the variety of tools in this area. And that doesn't mean that it has to be project management or strategic planning around libraries. We can learn a lot from the many, many other fields that are doing this work and have done this work for a lot longer than libraries have. So basic planning is nothing too fancy, but it does require you to get the idea out of your head and onto a piece of paper. The simplest of planning tools can be a Word document that can look sort of like this. The goal of any document is to start getting the ideas, like I said, out of your head and onto a piece of paper. If you're doing your work with a team, it also provides an opportunity to build consensus around the document and around what your goals are. I think lots of us have been in teams at times where one person is just absolutely sure of a specific thing we agreed to and the other person just doesn't remember it that way at all. Once it's in writing, that's your opportunity to clarify what you think you heard and to get agreement on how to proceed. So this document that I put up here is something we used for a project we were doing here, a project around reaching out and partnering, and this is nothing fancier than a table in Microsoft Word. But it does list a few essential categories that I'd like to encourage you to think about in any kind of planning work. What is, the first column, what is the work? Give it a name. What are you going to call it? The second column is what are you trying to accomplish? What is your goal? We shouldn't do something just because it's fun, but we should really think about what is our goal. And your goal can be really lofty. It can also be practical. It can also be very personal. A goal doesn't have to always have these larger impacts to teens. It can be help myself go less crazy or help myself be better organized in my office. This type of planning tool can be used from small projects to those much larger in scale. The next column is one that we're not always as sophisticated with in libraries. It's actually school libraries do this a lot better than public libraries have in the past. So how can we measure this? How will you know if you reached your goal? And you don't have to get fancy, but you do have to think of something to count. If the project you're working on is about recruiting new participants in your teen book club, how will you know if you're successful? Well, you'll count how many kids came. So, but I would really encourage you to keep this column because it's through the measurement that we are able to tell whether or not we have succeeded at our goal. And lots of times, you know, we're overachievers in libraries. We like to succeed at our goals. Lots of times we don't succeed at our goals, and that can be just as instructful and just as helpful as when we do reach them. So the next column is who is doing the work. Is this you? Does this involve your teen volunteers? What role will other staff have to play? And what other pieces are part of this plan? The next column is what do you need to do this? So this is the things that you're going to need to accomplish this. This could be scheduling time off desk at the same time as a colleague so that you can work more collaboratively. It maybe is getting out of your library a little bit more in order to connect with a partner. This you want to be really thoughtful of and put down some things that you're going to actually need, things that you can actually attain, because you'll need to work hard on that column as well. And then the last column is when is this going to start and end? It's very simple timeline. So it's not magical, but writing it down is a start, and you may find that as you write it down, it becomes less clear and that you don't know why you're doing it, or as you figure out all of the things that you're going to need to get before being successful, it may become unmanageable. But the more you write it down, the better you'll have a sense of whether or not you can commit to it. And writing it down doesn't mean you have to do it. It just is a way to think through the parts that you haven't really thought of yet. So another tool I want to introduce you to is called the logic model. If you've done work with grant writing, you may have come across this term before if you've worked with funders on some of your services. So a logic model is a tool often used by funders, managers, evaluators to evaluate the effectiveness of a program. You can think of it like a planning tool on steroids. And as I've worked with consultants to introduce logic models to staff I've worked with, some have been a bit overwhelmed, but others have been very overjoyed and have started using them in the development and creation of new programs and services. And just like with the planning tool we talked about a minute ago, this can be a really helpful document in thinking through what is the difference that you're trying to make in delivery of service. And so for this example, it would be teens. What are you trying to make the difference, and what are the pieces that are going to go into that plan? So just like the previous example, this really is just a document. It's not something you perfect and never touch again and then frame and hang on your wall. It's something that evolves and grows over time as you change your service, as you get new ideas, as you learn from your program, and you work with others. In addition to it being a term that's used in grant making, so that's one reason to be familiar with just that phrase, logic model. This is also something that can be very effective in presenting your case to leaders and to other stakeholders. There's pretty much nothing more effective or persuasive in the world than showing that you've done a tremendous amount of thinking prior to asking for funding and prior to asking for staff time or to devote your own time to something. So in my experience, we often underestimate how much time it will take for us to do really good youth development programs, and youth work can be really hard. Then we're left in a situation where we need to beg our coworkers to take our desk shift or run to the dollar store in our lunch hour. Planning tools don't eliminate everything that's unexpected, but they can help us think through what we're actually going to need in order to be successful in the program. Dwight D. Eisenhower said, "In preparing for battle, I have always found that plans are useless, but planning is indispensable." And that's certainly been my experience, and I know for all of us who have worked with teens, there's just no planning that can prepare you for some of the things that happen in serving young people, and I think that's part of the fun of it. But as you begin to populate your logic model, it clarifies your thinking. So there's a couple of different columns here and some guidelines below. So resources is what are the things you use to run your program. So you need staff time, you need supervision, do you have partnerships, do you have a budget? Those are the things you have to work with. The activities column is the things you're going to do. So what are you going to do with teens? Are you planning to run a book club? Are there some other elements there? What are you going to be doing with them? The outputs is the counting. So that's the things you count. In libraries, our most commonly used output is what? It's circulation, right? Here's how many books are being checked out. Here's how many people are attending programs. And that's what that column's for. So what are the things that you could count? And that will really depend on what type of a service, space, program, partnership, whatever you're proposing in this column. The short-term outcomes are the things that you'd be able to see. What kind of behavior changes or what kinds of things would you like to see young people see happening for them after just a few months of participating? So let's say, just you overuse my teen book club example, let's say you started a weekly teen book club. What do you think you might see a few months from when you started? You might start observing some changes in how they interact with each other. You might observe some increased knowledge about how to talk about a book. So those are some of the short-term outcomes. The long-term outcomes are where we're starting to get into what difference does this make for in 3 to 6 years, what might you expect to see? What are some of those short-term outcomes? What could that lead you to imagine happening for young people? And then the impact is the lasting effect. So like at the broadest level, like does your community have a goal around young people graduating on time? So you shouldn't get too waylaid by trying to prove that your teen book club will impact graduation, but you do want to think through what is the largest, that's the long-term outcome or the impact that you're thinking of having. So for a very large service change or a new space or a building, you may end up with something looking a little bit more like this. And this is a draft. This is not anything close to our final, but this was the initial draft of a logic model that some of the folks that I work with put together when planning for a new connected learning space in our library. So this was drafted before construction had even begun, and as we've continued to have the space, we're learning new things, we're understanding what activities we can really deliver on, and what changes we can expect and measure on the part of young people. But it gives you, I think, a couple of examples of where that would be. And I would say we really drank the Kool-Aid on this logic model. Staff who developed it worked very, very hard on it. It's very involved, and I think we're continuing to understand what short-term outcomes we actually are starting to see, and what the longer-term impact is that we think that we're having. So sitting down and thinking about these elements, thinking them through is really critical work. And we need to do it if we want to advance our services to teens, but also because we don't really have a lot of extra time in our day. And we need to critically reflect on the time available to us and make better choices about the limited time that we do have. And you don't have to do, mercifully, a logic model for every single thing you want to try, but I really would encourage you to think about your desired result. What difference are you trying to make in the lives of young people as a result of what you're delivering in the library? And if we continue to ask ourselves that question in the ways that we're able, not every single second of every single day, but keeping that longer term goal and that longer term impact outcome in mind, we'll still have to make choices about what we're going to do and what we don't have to do or we don't want to do, but we'll be more confident in that the things we stop doing are the things that we stop doing because they didn't meet the impact and the outcome that we wanted for young people in our community. So planning tools aren't going to solve all your problems, but they're going to help you a little bit think through and give some rigor to what work you want to achieve and what result we want to see on behalf of young people. So I hope you learned something new. Planning tools are your friend, and here's a couple places to get started. And thanks for joining us for the YALSA Snack Break.